I want to thank you all again for your presence this evening. If you will, go ahead, open up your Bibles over to the book of Exodus. Hebrews. Let's do Hebrews first today. Hebrews chapter 8, verses 1 through 5. Hebrews chapter 8 and verses 1 through 5. Someone want to read that passage for us? Hebrews 8, verses 1 through 5.
Now, the main point of what has been said is we have such a high who is taking his seat at the right hand of the throne of the majesty in heaven, a minister of the sanctuary in the true tabernacle, which the Lord creates, not man. For every high priest is appointed to offer both gifts and sacrifices, so it is necessary that this high priest also have something to offer. Now, if he were here on earth, he would not be a priest at all, since there are those who offer the gifts according to the law, who serve a copy and a shadow of the heavenly things, just as Moses was warned by God when he was about to erect the tabernacle. For see, he says that you make all things according to the pattern that was shown you on the mountain.
And so what we're seeing there in that passage is that, as what we've been looking at these past few weeks, the fact that those things of the Old Testament foreshadow the heavenly things. They foreshadow Christ even. And we're seeing that in our study here of the tabernacle, the priests, and the offerings. Last couple weeks, we've looked over some different furnishings within the tabernacle. And what we looked at last week, of course, 2 weeks ago rather, was the fact that you had the ark, which was made of acacia wood. And we pointed out most acacia trees had thorns on them. Whenever a person wanted the wood, they had to work their way around those thorns. And we said that perhaps foreshadows Christ and that he would end up wearing a crown of thorns. We also saw different things about the ark. We saw that it was to be overlaid with pure gold. It was going to be having poles to lift it up, and within it was the old law, specifically the Ten Commandments. We saw also that it had Aaron's rod, and it also had some of the manna from back in Exodus chapter 16. And he points all of that out in chapter 9 of Hebrews. But one of the things that was in the ark, again, was the law of Moses. And what I think we see is what we see again. We have that mercy seat that's put on top, and it's got those cherubim almost in a bowing position towards the middle. And as I stated last week and a couple weeks ago, that would have that almost looks like they're as if the cherubim are bowing toward an invisible God. Uh, and then also, of course, we saw that the mercy seat separated the Israelites from the Ten Commandment tablets. And that mercy seat is what it's called. It's basically a lid, but I think it shows that it foreshadows really the mercy that God had in taking and separating the Jews from the old law. And that was done in Christ. We also see that with that mercy seat, or rather on a different furnishing, another material made of similar items. We saw the what's called the table of showbread, and you had a table once again of that acacia wood, overlaid with pure gold. They're going to have bread set out on this table and replaced on a weekly basis. And what did we say this foreshadows Christ? How this foreshadows Christ, this table of showbread. What did Christ say concerning himself in bread?
He's the bread of life.
He's the bread of life. And then last week and the week before, we also saw the golden lampstand. Again, this is going to be one of the furnishings that does not have acacia wood. It's just all gold. So this is going to be really a heavy piece of equipment right here, a heavy furnishing. And again, this is what an artist's rendering of what this lampstand probably looked like. And what this lampstand is going to be, it's going to be the only light that's in the tabernacle. Who remembers uh, what what that would be foreshadowing Christ? when we were talking about light. Christ is the light of the world. And so the golden lampstand would be foreshadowing Christ uh, being the light of the world. This is going to be the only light that is in the tabernacle. And when everything gets transferred over to the temple, it's going to be the only light that's in the temple. So that's an important thing there. Then we looked at last week, we looked and got into some of the materials to make this tabernacle. The tabernacle really was just a big tent. You may remember some translations we talked about last week say, well, they say in 2 Corinthians chapter 5 at the beginning, we long to shed this tabernacle. Some translations say we long to shed this tent. And so that's basically what this was. We looked at all these different coverings that are going to be on it. And the only one that's going to be seen is the porpoise skin. We talked about this a little bit. You had the 10 curtains, the first layer, which would have been unseen to everybody else, was the curtains of fine twisted linen and blue and scarlet material. And what did we say last week? Those kind of collars were typically for. What kind of relationship, if you will, would those collars have to those back in that day? Royalty. Royalty. I think this would foreshadow Christ's royalty. Then you looked, and on top of that, you had the curtains of goat's hair over the tents, over that particular, those coverings. And so, what were goats used for in the Old Covenant? They were used for sacrifice. And so, foreshadowing Christ's sacrifice. Then you have the ram skins dyed red. You think about blood. Yeah, red blood. And then, of course, over that you have the porpoise skins. Again, people try and get different ideas of what this was. People debate whether this was a porpoise or a seal or a badger, but whatever it is, it was rough skin. Was what it was. It was an ugly, unattractive, uh, really unappealing covering. So, yeah, yeah. Yeah, but if this was going to be whatever this was, rough stuff. If someone comes in and says, "Oh, this is just some poor person's tent. This isn't anything important." If a Gentile walked in there, they'd say, "It's just a poor person's tent. This isn't anything important." There's this big, he's going to talk about the courtyard in a moment. But there's this big courtyard, and here we come into the tabernacle, into this big courtyard, and it's like all we see is this, we see a place for sacrifices, a couple other things we're going to address here in a minute, and just this ugly looking tent. That's what it looked like. We also talked about, we saw the boards for the tabernacle made of acacia wood again. And what you had was the two tenons for each board fitted to one another. This thing is going to be fitted together, come together, kind of like how we would put a tent together almost, although kind of in a more old-fashioned way, you might say. This is going to be an old-fashioned way of putting an old kind of tent together. It's fitted together. What did we say about the church? What does the Bible say about the church? Every member being fitted together. Ephesians chapter 4. And probably foreshadowing the church in this. It's interesting because what you have is the boards here, and they're holding up these different curtains, these different coverings. And the coverings are foreshadowing Christ. And then what you read in 1 Timothy 3:16 and 17, it says that the church is the pillar and support of the truth. Lifting up Christ, if you will. And I find that interesting because here you see the tabernacle, the wooden pieces lifting up the curtains. And the curtains foreshadowing Christ, the church, or the curtains foreshadowing Christ, and the boards foreshadowing the church. The church needs to lift up Christ, and what everything that He said. And so I just find that kind of interesting there. That it's almost like it's foreshadowing that very fact. that the church is the pillar and support of the truth. And then you also keep moving on from there. We saw, well, this is basically, again, in the image we looked at. All they're going to see is that badger skin. I mean, this image, this is just kind of an idea of what this would have looked like. But you're going to have that linen, and then the goat's hair over that, and then the ram skin dyed red over that, and then the badger, porpoise, seal skin over that. And so you're going to have something that, again, is just not very attractive looking, very unappealing. And what did we read about Christ? I think I skipped ahead of that. What does the Bible say about Christ's appearance in Isaiah chapter 53? He had no stately form or appearance that we should desire him or want him as a ruler, basically, is what it's getting at. And so that's kind of how the tabernacle is going to look with the badger skin poured over it. Any questions or comments on any of this so far?
Also, talk about the characters too.
Yeah,
The Word of God as well, even though we see Christ in them.
yeah, yeah,
So I think it's really this not just Christ in general, but His Word and how life's made His way to the truth.
yeah, exactly. Very good point there. It's going to light up. You have that lampstand, it's going to light up everything in the tabernacle, and Christ's word lights up, everything so that way people can understand. So, a very good point there. And then, of course, we looked at the veils. The veils are going to be in there. They're kind of basically the things separating people from the inside of the tabernacle, the outer veil, and you have the inner veil. Look at something probably like this. Again, you'd have the 4 pillars on the inside, 5 pillars on the outside, the veil draped across it. And what this veil did, specifically the inner veil, it separated people from the glory of God. You may remember, the Bible says that when Christ died, the veil, of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. And we talked about what that represented. I mean, you have the death of Christ taking place. Probably showed the end of separation between God and man. Again, that veil separated man from the glory of God. The high priest only went in like once a year to do the yearly Day of Atonement sacrifice. The end of the old law was taking place. Colossians 2:13 and 14. He has taken all those things, the certificate of decrees against us, which was hostile to us, taken it out of the way and nailed it to the cross. The end of the glory of God in the temple also took place. Then it was no longer, the glory of God was no longer there. Any questions or comments on that? So we also came into then the last week, we came with the altar that was outside. He's gonna come back and address in Exodus the altar of incense later. There's going to be 2 altars. There's an altar of incense that's just right there by the veil, and then you're going to have this altar, which was for the sacrifices. Probably out of all those photos, maybe when it was newer, maybe when it was just freshly made, you might say, and put together, it may have looked like the top left and the bottom there. But as it aged, it probably looked more like the top right as age got to it. Now, of course, it was made of acacia wood. It was made of bronze. These were things that were meant to last a long time, and they would have these for about 1,000 years, or somewhere around 1,000 years. But what we're seeing, it's going to look something like this. At least what some artists put out there. But what was that altar used for? Who remembers that? What was the altar used for uh, on a daily basis, even not just on the Day of Atonement? Sacrifice.
Animal sacrifice.
Do what?
Animal sacrifice.
Yeah, animal sacrifice. Yeah, yeah, and there'll be other sacrifices too that'll we'll actually bring up. There was a animal sacrifice. There was a grain sacrifice. There was all kinds of sacrifices. Susan, sorry, did you?
Well, yeah, what he's saying, it's just reading where they said that where the horns are on the, sides of the finger cloth, that shoes, which goes into what it's saying about the sacrifice.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, you would have the horns that they could hang the stuff on. But yeah, very good point. And again, this was where sacrifices took place. What was Jesus in regards to sacrifice?
Himself.
Yeah, himself was he was the sacrifice. He was the ultimate sacrifice. It says there in Ephesians 5 verse 2, walk in love just as Christ loved you and gave himself up for us. A and so we see that idea of a sacrifice there. And then let's see, we're coming into the courtyard of the tabernacle now. And so in Exodus 27, looking at verses 9 through 19, as I've stated before in previous classes, this is not that entire section. It's just a piece of Exodus chapter 27 here in those verses. He's going to go into so much detail. You see those ellipsis points. There's all kinds of detail on measurements and how high this needs to be, how tall, how wide, how long the tabernacle is going to be on one side and on the other. At the very beginning, it says, you shall make the court of the tabernacle. On the south side, there shall be hangings for the court of fine twisted linen, 100 cubits long for one side, with their 20 sockets of bronze. The hooks of the pillars and their bands shall be of silver, and its 20 pillars with their 20 sockets of bronze. The hooks of the pillars and their bands shall be of silver. So this is going to be, kind of, there's going to be hooks and all kinds of things kind of stretched out over here. And so it says, continuing on, for the gate of the court. So he addresses how this is going to be made, the courtyard itself, and then he addresses the gate. I want you to notice the gates. For the gate of the court, there shall be a screen of 20 cubits of blue. There's those royal collars again, blue and purple and scarlet material, and fine twisted linen, the work of a weaver. All the pillars around the court shall be furnished with bands, silver bands, with their hooks of silver and their sockets of bronze. And so you may remember last week I said there's not going to be a whole lot of, precious metals on the outside of this thing. It's just the silver. Really, is all that's going to be visible to anybody. If someone comes in, wants to steal something, they say, oh, there's silver here, silver bands here, but that's all they're going to see, these silver things. And then, of course, the bronze. But the gold, all the gold we talked about, that's going to be inside of the tabernacle. And so I just find that interesting. All the gold, the most precious metal that they would have known, is going to be hidden away. But when we're looking at this courtyard, this is a depiction of what this may have looked like. Along with the tabernacle, you kind of see you can maybe kind of make out the little tiny burnt off the altar there. And then, of course, the laver, which is going to come up here in a second, between both the tabernacle, the tent itself, and the burnt offering. Again, this is just a couple of artists' ideas of what this may have looked like. But when you look at this is very similar to the tabernacle, at least with those royal collars. When you think about those royal collars, there's only, and he even says this, he says the gate. How many gates are there? There's only one. One gate. One way in, one way out.
What are the tents and stuff that people?
Yeah, on the right photo, that's kind of an idea of what this may have looked like when the Israelites were still going about. Yeah,
In tents.
living in tents. Yeah, but that kind of gives you kind of an idea of what this, look may have looked like, having all the tents surrounding it and everything on
People up there.
it. That's meant to represent the glory of God. Yeah. It does look like a tornado, though. Yeah, but that's how most people try to, put that forth. Yeah,
And even these tents that are around the side of the courtyard here,
yeah,
he gives specific instructions as to who's supposed to be on which side. They couldn't
exactly.
just go and pick where they wanted to be. Each group, depending on which tribe, was on a particular side. of that
Yeah,
order.
yeah. I could see someone wanting to get into a fight. I want to be the one by the tabernacle. I want to be just a few feet away from God. You know, I could see some people getting into an argument over that. But yeah, very good point there. Specific areas, and God's very specific through all of this. He gives you the measurements. He gives people the materials. Person couldn't just say, well, all these materials are well and good, but I think I'm going to use a different collar. They couldn't substitute. They couldn't add to. They couldn't say, well, we got blue and purple, and I know he said scarlet, but I want to use scarlet for my grandma, or I want to use scarlet for this person. You couldn't just, not do it. You had to do what he said, as he said it. In 3 feet, if he said 3 feet, 3.5 is not good enough. You need to shave it off to 3 feet, things like that. Do it the way he commanded, not the way they may have said, well, we're tired. Can't we just substitute it this way?
No, I did that. Art probably wouldn't have done it.
Oh, no, no, there would have been no floating ark if that happened. Exactly. Very good point. Yeah. And that's the same thing here. God would not have been happy if they didn't build it the way he wanted. He's very specific about it. Again, and we also, again, coming back to the those royal collars making up the gates. Again, royal collars foreshadowing Christ's royalty. What did Christ say about himself? He said, "I am the way and the truth and the life." And when you think about that, I am the way. There's only one way in and one way out. uh, when it comes to the courtyard. And even when it comes to going into the tent, they didn't have a back entrance to come in to where the Ark of the Covenant was. It was just the one way in, one way out. Yes.
Jesus kind of said, go look at the sheepfold, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we'll access to the Father is through Jesus, no other way.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Very good point. And that's interesting. He uses that verbiage, and if someone tries to come into the temple or the tabernacle another way, they're probably going to think he is a thief or robber. So, very, very good point there to make. You keep moving on, though. Any other questions or comments on the courtyard specifically? You keep moving on. He gets it now into the really the altar of incense. The altar of incense is going to be very similar to both the table of showbread and the Ark of the Covenant, but at the same time, it's going to be different. And this is just part of what's quoted, part of the passage here, Exodus 30, verses 1 through 10. But it says, moreover, you shall make an altar as a place for burning incense. You shall make it of acacia wood. Its horns shall be of one piece with it, just like the horns that were on the altar outside, the altar for offering sacrifices. So this needed to be. You shall overlay it with pure gold, its top and its sides all around, and its horns. And you shall make a gold molding all around for it. You shall make 2 gold rings for it, on opposite sides. And they shall be holders for poles with which to carry it. You shall make the poles of acacia wood and overlay them with gold. There's one big noticeable thing you might see there. I have it emboldened there. With the Ark of the Covenant, 4 poles. You insert a pole into 2 and another pole into 2. And then it was the same thing with the table of showbread. 4 holes, but 4 rings. Put one in the 2 rings, and put one in the other 2 rings. Here it just says 2 gold rings. A lot of people try to come up with different ideas for why it says it. Some people say, well, it's. Some people make the argument that it's a misprint. Very unlikely. People have actually come up with an image of what this may have looked like. That one on the top right is the people who say maybe it was a misprint. or a mistranslating or something. But the top left, look at that. Two gold rings. They put the poles in. That person could make this work if they did it just right. And so the bottom one there doesn't really show you what it looked like, but you could put one into the two rings, uh, or excuse me, put one pole in each ring, and so that just going to have two rings here. One put one pole in one set, or excuse me, put one pole in one ring, one in the other. But when it comes to the altar of incense specifically, this one has a couple different thoughts when it comes to foreshadowing. Uh, People are kind of divided. Maybe it means both, but some people say, some brethren have said, well, it means just prayer. And that could very well be the case. All the incense just representing prayer or foreshadowing prayer. You see it in Revelation. One example in Revelation, I believe it's chapter 7. It's either chapter 5, 6, or 7, but it mentions that there was incense offered to God. But it says, which is the prayers of the saints. There in the book of Revelation. And so incense is often associated with prayer. Matter of fact, you even look in, I didn't write it down, but when you're reading about Zacharias, the father of John the Baptist, in Luke chapter 1, he is right there offering incense. He's there in the temple. Again, everything's been transferred over to the temple by the time of the New Testament, of course, long before that. But what you're seeing here in Luke chapter 1 is he's there, he's offering incense, and it says the people outside were praying. And so a lot of people think that this is just a foreshadowing of praying to God. Another thought some people have suggested is that it foreshadows being able to draw near to God, since it was the closest piece of furniture to before actually being able to go in, before actually going into the veil. We saw, you know, before being able to go into where the glory of God was. Any questions or comments on that? And just, it could be both, but a lot of people think that that's a foreshadowing and representation of that. You move on to the last piece of furnishing here in the tabernacle. Talks about a laver or laver. It says there in Exodus 30, verses 18 through 21, you shall also make a laver of bronze with its base of bronze for washing. And you shall put it between the tent of meeting and the altar. And you shall put water in it. Aaron and his sons shall wash their hands and their feet from it when they enter the tent of meeting. They shall wash with water so that they will not die. Or when they approach the altar to minister, by offering up in smoke a fire sacrifice to the Lord. So they shall wash their hands and their feet, so that they will not die, and it shall be a perpetual statute for them. In other words, this needs to keep on going. I want you to think about this. Some people, some brethren, I mentioned a brother who tried putting some of this together many years ago, passed away sometime in 2017. But one of the things he suggested was that this is a foreshadowing of baptism. And while that may be the case, I take a little bit of issue with that. I'm not going to, cause an argument over it if I were to ever encounter someone that believed that. But the issue I take with it is it's because they're not getting immersed when you're seeing this. All they're doing is washing their hands and feet before they serve the Lord. What I think it's rather foreshadowing may be more in line with the blood of Christ. Could someone read for us 1 John chapter 1, verses 7 through 9? First John chapter 1 verses 7 through 9. What cleanses us? His blood. And so the blood of Christ cleanses us. It says Jesus cleanses us. When I read that, the bronze laver, I think, foreshadows a cleansing taking place, but I think it's a foreshadowing of Christ's blood. Any questions or comments in that? There's one more I want us to look at. Uh, I don't have the verses up on the screen because I think with this one it may be good just to go ahead and read through the entire chapter in Exodus. Let's go ahead in Exodus talks about the high priests. This is this is what the bronze laver may have looked like, and a artist representation on the left, and I think the right is kind of like a mold. How do you say it? Not a mold, but a model. I guess I'll call it. Kind of an idea of what that may have looked like.
With much water, but it's still.
Yeah, yeah. It may have. They then again they only had to wash their hands and feet though. Now, if they had to take a bath, maybe it needed to be bigger, but yeah, but yeah, they had to wash their hands and feet. Who knows how often that water got changed out to? They may have changed it out, every week or so, but because they didn't have the concept of germs, but it may have been the one on the left or the right. Um, but when you're reading here in Exodus, you start reading about the high priest. And it's interesting. It's really interesting, especially when it comes to this high priest, because I noticed something. I told you about this concerning the high priest that I had never noticed before. Something he did when he offered the sacrifice on the Day of Atonement. I turn over to Exodus 28. We're going to first look through this first. Just notice, basically how he's going to look. This kind of gives you an idea of what he looked like, but there's an explanation to this. It says in verse 1, "Then bring near to you Aaron, your brother, and his sons with him, from among the sons of Israel, to minister as priests to me. Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu," who are going to end up being executed by the Lord, "Eleazar, and Ithamar, Aaron's sons. You shall make holy garments for Aaron your brother, for glory and for beauty. You shall speak to all the skillful persons whom I have endowed with the spirit of wisdom." In other words, there's going to be people who had kind of, they're going to have miraculous knowledge, kind of, in a sense, of being able to, okay, here's how this thing needs to be made just according to how God wanted it. That they make Aaron's garments to consecrate him, that he may minister as a priest to me. These are the garments which they shall make: a breastpiece. You can kind of see it up there. He's going to hold stones in it. A breastpiece, and an ephod, and a robe, and a tunic of checkered work, a turban, and a sash, and they shall make holy garments for Aaron, your brother, and his sons. That he may minister as priest to me. And this ephod, I think a lot of people say that the ephod was this thing that's holding up the chest piece and the checkered work there, all of that. It's that thing holding up specifically the chest piece there in the middle. You can kind of see those little straps right there. A lot of people think that that's probably the ephod, what's holding it there. But anyways, you just keep moving on from there in verse 5. "They shall take the gold and the blue and the purple and the scarlet material." He's going to wear all the royal collars on him. "And the scarlet material and the fine linen. They shall also make the ephod of gold And so, this is going to be the only gold outside the tabernacle. It's not a piece of the tabernacle, but it's going to be on the high priest. Continuing on there in verse 6 of Exodus 28, it says, they shall also make the ephod of gold of blue and purple and scarlet material and fine twisted linen, the work of the skillful workman. It shall have 2 shoulder pieces joined to its 2 ends, that it may be joined. The skillfully woven band which is on it shall be like its workmanship, of the same material of gold, of blue, and purple, and scarlet material, and fine twisted linen. He's going to be wearing all these royal collars. Again, it's just emphasizing this. Verse 9, you shall take 2 onyx stones and engrave on them the names of the sons of Israel, 6 of their names on the one stone, and the names of the remaining 6 on the other stone. He's getting really specific here, according to their birth. So you'd have, the eldest, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, and then on another, you just, keep going down through the age of each of those tribes. But anyways, it says in verse 11, as a jeweler engraves a signet, you shall engrave the 2 stones according to the names of the sons of Israel. You shall set them in filigree settings of gold. So it's going to be, something to hold them, basically. You shall put the 2 stones on the shoulder pieces of the ephod as stones of memorial for the sons of Israel, and Aaron shall bear their names before the Lord on his 2 shoulders for a memorial. You shall make filigree settings of gold, and 2 chains of pure gold. You shall make them of twisted cordage work, and you shall put the corded chains on the filigree settings. This is going to be, it's kind of confusing what he's, saying here, but basically he's just saying, here's how you're fastening everything together. And then verse 14, 2 chains of pure gold, you shall make them of twisted cordage work. You shall put the corded chains on the filigree settings. Verse 15, you shall make a breastpiece of judgment, the work of the skillful workman, like the work of the ephod. You shall make it of gold, of blue and purple and scarlet material, and fine twisted linen. You shall make it. It shall be square and folded double, a span in length and a span in width. You shall mount on it 4 rows of stones. The first row shall be a row of ruby, topaz, and emerald. And the second row, a turquoise, and sapphire, and a diamond. Verse 19. And the third row, a jacinth, an agate, and an amethyst. And the fourth row, a beryl, an onyx, and a jasper. They shall be set in gold filigree. So that's basically what you got right there on his chest piece right there, is all those different precious stones there. And what it says, the stones shall be according to the names of the sons of Israel, 12 according to their names. They shall be like the engravings of a seal, each according to the name of the 12 tribes. Each of those stones is going to represent one of the 12 tribes. Verse 22, you shall make on the breastpiece chains of twisted cordage work in pure gold. You shall make on the breastpiece 2 rings of gold, and shall put the 2 rings on the 2 ends of the breastpiece. You can kind of maybe see them there, but basically this is going to, again, be what they fastened the ephod and the cords to this thing. He's going so much detail given here into how this thing needs to look. And it's just interesting.
This is going to be very, very, very heavy.
This would have been heavy. What he's wearing here is going to be heavy. In a hot day, it's going to be hotter for this high priest. It's going to be really tough for him. And he's going to wear this all but one day of the year, and we'll get to that here in a minute. Verse 24, You shall put on the 2 cords of gold on the 2 rings at the ends of the breastpiece. You shall put the other 2 ends of the 2 cords on the 2 filigree settings, and put them on the shoulder pieces of the ephod at the front of it. You shall make 2 rings of gold, and shall place them on the 2 ends of the breastpiece, on the edge of it, which is toward the inner side of the ephod. You shall make 2 rings of gold, and put them on the bottom of the 2 shoulder pieces of the ephod, on the front of it, close to the place where it is joined, above the skillfully woven band of the ephod. They shall bring the breastpiece by its rings to the rings of the ephod with a blue cord, so that it will be on the skillfully woven band of the ephod, and that the breastpiece will not come loose from the ephod. Aaron shall carry the names of the sons of Israel in the breastpiece of judgment over his heart when he enters the holy place for a memorial before the Lord continually. So he's going to go in during whenever he goes into the holy place. The most holy place is going to be a different story. We'll get to that as we're going through this. Verse 30. You shall put in the breastpiece of judgment the Urim and the Thummim, and they shall be over Aaron's heart when he goes in before the Lord. And Aaron shall carry the judgment of the sons of Israel over his heart before the Lord continually. And so I just find that interesting. Does anyone know what the Urim, and Thummim are? They're not mentioned a whole lot here in the scriptures, but basically a lot of people think that the Urim and Thummim might have been certain kinds of stones, possibly, that he just put in the breastpiece. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's the speculation there. Whatever it was, it applied to them. But anyways, you keep moving on, and they shall be over Aaron's heart. These were going to be over Aaron's heart when he goes in before the Lord. And Aaron shall carry the judgment of the sons of Israel over his heart before the Lord continually. You shall make the robe of the ephod all of blue. So there's going to be a robe. You see this blue that's underneath all of this stuff. You have the white tunic, and then you have the blue, and then you have all these special collars here that are going to be on top of that. But all of these collars, royal collars, the blue tunic, there shall be an opening at its top, in the middle of it, around its opening, there shall be a binding of woven work, like the opening of a coat of mail, so that it will not be torn. They don't want this thing getting torn up easily. You shall make on its hem. So the hem is like down here, like what you see. I'll come over here and show this to you, kind of. The hem is right there. At least what he's talking about it here. It says on the hem, pomegranates of blue and purple and scarlet material, all around on its hem, and bells of gold between them all. So there's going to be bells. There's going to be little pomegranate-shaped cloth things there made of that, again, those royal collars. So specific about this. Bells of gold between them all around. A golden bell and a pomegranate. A golden bell and a pomegranate all around on the hem of the robe. And so he's saying, here's the design. You're going to design it like this. Pomegranate bell, pomegranate bell, pomegranate bell. So specific on this. It's not like, throw some bells and pomegranates on. No, you're going to do it in this order. And very, very specific on this. Verse 35, it shall be on Aaron when he ministers, and its tinkling shall be heard when he enters and leaves the holy place before the Lord, so that he will not die. You shall also make a plate of pure gold, and it shall engrave on it like the engravings of a seal, holy to the Lord. You shall fasten it on a blue cord, and it shall be on the turban. The turban's the hat that he's wearing. You can kind of see that a little bit of blue there on the turban. At the very top, there's going to be that inscription there on that piece of gold, holy to the Lord. It's almost like a crown, really. A person may back in that day may have mistaken it for a crown, at least the gold piece. Is that a crown you're wearing? But anyways, he moves on. Again, verse 37, you shall fasten it on a blue cord, and it shall be on the turban, it shall be at the front of the turban. It shall be on Aaron's forehead, and Aaron shall take away the iniquity of the holy things which the sons of Israel consecrate, with regard to all their holy gifts, and it shall always be on his forehead, that he may be accepted before the Lord. So he's talking about the turban. He actually kind of starts from the out and goes inward a little bit. He says, you need to have that whole piece right there that's all royal collars, all the scarlet, blue, purple material. And then he says, then you need the blue tunic. Here's what it needs to look like. Then you have the turban. That's what it needs to look like. Now he's going to go with this white piece here that's underneath the blue tunic. It says, verse 39, you shall weave the tunic of checkered work, of fine linen, and you shall make a turban of fine linen, and you shall make a sash, the work of a weaver. For Aaron's sons, you shall make tunics. You shall also make sashes for them, and you shall make caps for them for glory and for beauty. You shall put them on Aaron your brother, and on his sons with him, and you shall anoint them, and ordain them, and consecrate them, that they may serve me as priests. You shall make for them linen breeches to cover their bare flesh. They shall reach from the loins even to the thighs. They shall be on Aaron and on his sons when they enter the tent of meeting, and when they approach the altar to minister in the holy place, so that they do not incur guilt and die. It shall be a statute forever to him and to his descendants after him. In other words, the priests need to keep up. He goes from the out and says, here's what needs to be on the outside. Here's what needs to be below that. Here's what needs to be below that. Here's what needs to be below that. That's how he's describing what they need to wear. He's very specific, very specific. Now, here's something I want us to know. Is there any questions or comments as we're going through this? A lot of the royal collars he's wearing here. A lot of royal collars, gold, the royal collars. It's just, there's no doubt that he's foreshadowing Christ. We talk about Christ being our great high priest. We see that in the book of Hebrews. I think this even is shown a little bit more. Turn over to Leviticus. Turn in your Bibles over to Leviticus chapter 16. I want you to see this. Leviticus chapter 16. This is what I noticed about a year, maybe 2 years ago. Look with me at Leviticus chapter 16. Leviticus chapter 16 beginning. Could someone read for us verses 1 through 4?
The Lord spoke unto Moses after the death two sons of Aaron, when they offered before the Lord and died. And the Lord said unto Moses, speak unto Aaron, thy brother, that he cannot at all times enter the holy place within the veil before the mercy seat, which is upon the ark, and yet die not. And I will appear in the cloud of adversity. How far did you?
Through verse 4.
Thus shall Aaron come into the holy place with a young bullock for a sin offering and a ram for the burnt offering. He shall put on the holy linen coat, and shall have linen breeches upon his flesh, and shall be girded with linen girdle, and with linen mitres shall be attired. They are holy garments. Therefore shall he wash his flesh in water, and so put them on.
What's he wearing when he goes to offer the yearly atonement?
The linen coat.
Yeah, just the white.
Mm-hmm.
Notice what it says. Notice what he said back in Exodus towards the end of the chapter we read, chapter 28. He said that the priests, the regular priests, they're just going to wear the white. Jesus, when he goes, or excuse me, the high priest, when he goes to offer the sacrifice, he's just going to be wearing the white tunic, the holy tunic there, just the white tunic, not anything else, not the blue, not the ephod, just the white tunic, and then also the turban. Think about that. I think that's interesting. When he goes to offer that yearly sacrifice, when the high priest does this, he's going to look like just like the other priests. Turn over to Philippians chapter 4. When Christ offered his sacrifice, he didn't come in all a raiment of beauty to offer it. He didn't come and, wear, and all of, you know, all kinds of royal beauty and everything to offer his sacrifice. But I want you to notice this. Can someone read for us? Actually read Philippians chapter 2, not chapter 4. Sorry about that. Philippians chapter 2, verses 4 through 8.
And each of you look not only to his own interest, brother. Have this in mind for yourself, which is yours in Christ Jesus. Even though you are from the form of God, not being of God, made to be grass. But emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, and being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross.
Christ emptied himself. He took on the form of a bondservant. He didn't come looking like a spiritual, some kind of angel. He came in the form of man. Think about that. And that's what we're seeing foreshadowed with what the high priest does with that yearly sacrifice. He goes in, none of the royal robes are on him, they're all holy garments, but none of the royal collars and stones and gold, none of that's on him other than, the crown, I guess you would say there that says holy to the Lord. I'm not wearing anything else other than the regular white tunics like the other priests. And yet that's when he offers the sacrifices with all the royal stuff taken off. Think about that. That's being foreshadowed all the way back in the Old Testament. Any questions or comments on that? Yeah.
16 more.
Yeah.
Verse 4 says, then we shall wait in body of water.
Yeah. Yeah.
Never discount water in God's plan.
Yeah.
The New Testament, Jesus tells Nicodemus, unless one is born of water and the Spirit, will by no means see God.
Yeah.
Right. So water, that was a foreshadow of water in the Old Testament, and they were there, and you see that. Those two items will get in there,
Mhm.
If you do a little research, Josephus and early writers of that same his contemporaries talk about what those items were.
Mhm.
They were stones that before the Josephus lined up at times. And he says those stones, this is his words, those stones quit working after the destruction of the first temple. And so it was, according to what he writes, it was something that indicated God had a message for the Israelites to approach the Holy Holies.
Yeah, very, very good point. I hadn't thought about that. I read something like that, but I didn't know it was Josephus who said it. The record I found was Wikipedia. So I was like, it's Wikipedia. So that may not be entirely accurate. But with it being Josephus, that very well could be the case. He was a historian. He would have wanted to make sure he got some things right. But yeah, very good point on a water in God's plan. Any other questions or comments on this? A lot of good comments, a lot of good points made tonight. We're out of time. Lord willing, next week we're going to look specifically at the offerings. The offerings are they're actually very interesting. There's 5 different ones that are mentioned. You have the burnt offering, you have the peace offering, there's going to be something called the grain offering, there's going to be a sin or trespass offering, and then there's going to be a guilt offering. So there's all kinds of offerings taking place. Those are going to be read about in Leviticus chapters 1 through 5. And then he also would give some instructions to the priest on how to handle those and go about them in chapters 6 and 7, and maybe some pieces here and there, parts here and there throughout the rest of the book of Leviticus. But Lord willing, we'll look at those offerings next week. Is there any questions or comments before we conclude tonight? And all of this stuff is, you know, it's interesting. It's tough to try and figure things out. It's God is very specific. The lessons we can take from this, I think, from all that we've looked at, is that Christ, we see him foreshadowed in the Old Testament. God specified what he wanted, to which any deviation of that would have been disobedience. And again, on top of that, he's even emphasizing obedience. He would say, make sure you make everything according to the pattern. And he was, like we said a moment ago, he mentioned God would give some people the spirit of wisdom. In other words, they would know, on top of, having the instruction manual, if you will, for these items, they would know
how to do it.
how to do it on top of that. And so, just a lot of things here throughout this section of the Old Testament that just gets overlooked so much. It's just sad that it gets overlooked, but, it is tough. It is tough to try and, figure out what's going on. But again, those are the three main lessons you can take away from it. Heavy emphasis on obedience, God's specificity required, and Christ being foreshadowed. Lord willing, we'll be back here Sunday, of course. And if there's anyone here that needs to get their heart right with God, God's always plans to bring man to salvation.